Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our August 1st Friday's Future Planning. I'm Tia Marsilli, Director of Trust at the ARC of Northern Virginia. And with us today is Rob Hudson, whom you cannot see because he's that black slide there who is doing the tech in the background for us. And then Kevin Collins, our account manager at the ARC of Northern Virginia. Kevin will be presenting on disbursing from your trust. We're recording this session and the slides will be sent out to you in PDF format, along with the link to the recording that you probably won't receive until early next week. Next slide, or start the slides, Kevin, please.
Sure.
Okay, so, and full screen, yeah. Are you able to get the other slide off the screen?
Sure. Yeah, give me 1 second.
Thank you.
How can I do that?
I don't know. I never have the next slide up like that. Maybe display settings. Yeah.
That good?
There you go. Excellent. So today's our first Fridays, as mentioned. So on the first Friday of every month, unless there's a holiday weekend, and then it's the second Friday, we offer a session bringing in experts on topics who present. And then I'm here to facilitate usually. So next month, so you know, on September 8th, we have Peter Wall from TrueLink presenting on Secure Act 2.0. So there have been updates to the Secure Act, and that it will be followed on October 6th with letter of intent. You may also know that we offer Trust Talk Tuesdays. So anything that we offer through the Trust program starts at 10 a.m. So Trust Talk Tuesdays are twice a month on Tuesday from 10 to 11:30 a.m. I speak a little bit about trusts and then open the floor to any trust questions people may have. And when those trust questions are exhausted, we also talk about Social Security, Medicaid waivers, housing, and all the other things that fall under futures planning for people with disabilities. The first Fridays is that purple badge on the left-hand side. And then the three bottom ones, the teal, the yellow, and the gray, dark gray, those are on the third Friday of every month. So the only thing that's recorded is the first Fridays. Everything else, since it's a facilitated forum with a lot of personal questions being asked, we do not record those. So we have, thank goodness, it's Financial Fitness Friday, where financial experts are on board, Special Needs Trust, where I invite an attorney to co-present with me, and Social Security Basics. So again, those three have experts alongside me talking about, and we each do a 5 to 15 minute mini presentation and then open the floor to questions. So this coming August 18th on Special Needs Trust, Sarah Aviles from McCandlish Lillard will be presenting. So there'll be an attorney on board on the 18th of August. So mark your calendars. Everything, you can see our web address up there, thearcofnovatrust.org. If you do /events, it takes you straight to the page where you can RSVP for any and all of these events. During the presentation, we ask you to remain on mute and use the Q&A to pop your questions in, and we'll go through those as time allows. We usually leave them until the very end. So Kevin, you won't have to read them. And the good thing about the Q&A, everybody, is that it doesn't pop up on the screen like a chat does, which can be very distracting to a speaker. So I'll be reading out those questions to you, Kevin, at the end, so you can answer them. Next slide. So for those of you who don't know, the ARC's mission is to promote and protect the human rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. You'll hear us refer to that as IDD, and actively support their full inclusion and participation in the community throughout their lifetimes. The ARC of Northern Virginia's footprint is Falls Church City, Alexandria City, Arlington, and Fairfax. The ARC of Northern Virginia's trust program footprint is the entire Commonwealth of Virginia, the state of Maryland, and the District of Columbia. And we serve anyone with any disability. So we follow the Social Security Act's definition, which is cognitive, mental, and physical disability. So anyone with any disability may have a special needs trust with us. It's not just limited to people with IDD. We're a local chapter of one of the largest nonprofit organizations supporting people with IDD and their families. So Kevin and I just returned from the ARC of Virginia convention, which was held in Richmond, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And so the ARC has 23 chapters in Virginia. We're a very active state. And I'd say we had a good time there, met a lot of great people, and there were some new, very good presenters. So that was exciting too. And we'll hopefully be bringing some of them to our first Fridays. Some people ask us how we're funded. We're funded through some direct services we provide, but largely supported by membership dues and donations. So please become a member. Those free consultations that we offer for the trust program, those are actually coming out of funds that members have used to donate to us. So in order for those to continue, it would be great for you guys to send in some donations, become members. Last night we had a fundraiser at Claire and Dawn's. Our next fundraiser is going to be the Arctoberfest at the end of October, which is our Halloween party. And before I forget, today was our moving day. So Kevin is actually at the new office. I'm at home because we don't have internet at the old office. And I think Rob is probably at the new office as well. So you'll be getting that. It's on our website, the new address. We're sending out a letter to all grantors, so you'll be receiving information. But we're now at 3060 Williams Drive, Suite 300 in Fairfax. So it's right behind the Mosaic, basically. We're moving about a mile and a half away. Next slide. So we have over 24 years of experience establishing and managing special needs trusts. There are more than 660 chapters nationwide, 11 in Maryland. We're at 23 chapters in Virginia. There's one starting up, so eventually we'll be 24 again, and one DC chapter. And we're the world's largest community-based organization of and for people with developmental disabilities. And our 501c3 date is March 21st of 1962. This is our current team. We're looking for a client, and the title is client coordinator. So we're looking for a new client coordinator. So if you're interested, send in your resume, but otherwise these are the people that help with the Special Needs Trust Program. Next slide. Oh, there it is. Lovely. There's our new slide. That's the third floor of the Venture X. So we're in a new communally shared spaces, but we have our own separate offices. It's really nice. Our official opening day is on Monday. So when you come up the elevator on the third floor, you'll be met by the Venture X receptionist who will direct you to our offices. I hope to see you there. We will be holding an open house, so keep reading those newsletters we send out via email to see when that is. Next slide. I think that may be the last slide. Nope, that's me. That's Allie. Allie's still handling my appointments until our new person, Grace Rhodes, is added. And so, Rob, you'll actually need to add Grace Rhodes to the previous slide because she's part-time with the trust. And I'm going to end this talk now and hand it over to Kevin, who will be presenting on dispersing from special needs trusts. Thank you, Kevin. And Kevin, by the way, where's your slide, Kevin? I thought there was a slide about you.
Oh yeah, sure. Let me bring it up.
Yeah, that was the next slide that I forgot about.
Yeah. No,
hang on.
We got one more.
One more slide. Da, 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 da. Okay. And here he is, Kevin Collins. So in addition to his background in sales and client management, Kevin has previously worked as a paraprofessional in special education at Kennedy Krieger Institute. As account manager at the ARC of Northern Virginia, he handles disbursements, spending requests, and supports clients with their use of their special needs trust funds. Kevin says that his experiences have taught him how valuable Effective communication techniques are in achieving both group and individual goals. Kevin studied psychology at Catholic University and has over 4 years of experience in business management. He enjoys baseball, camping, and cooking with his wife and adorable son. So welcome. And Kevin started at the ARC in March. We are so happy to have him there. And welcome aboard again, and again, Kevin. And I'm handing the microphone over to you now.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Tia. Let me bring up my slides. And before, as I'm getting them up, why don't I just say a little bit more about me? I'm from Baltimore, Maryland originally. And after college, that's when I worked with Kennedy Krieger and really started my career where I knew I wanted my career to go help in this community. And then with my experience in business management and account management, that led me to the ARC. And so I'm very happy to be here. So thank you all for joining. This presentation is dispersing from your special needs trust and budgeting. This is our disbursements team. Again, I'm the account manager. Also with me is Allie Shelby. She's our account coordinator. You might recognize her. She was with us in a different role for a number of years as the director of first impressions, but I'm very happy to have her working alongside me. And also with us is Fiona Wright, another account coordinator. She helps us part-time as well. So for today's agenda, we're going to go over a few things. First, we're going to talk about what a special needs trust can pay for, how to disperse from that self-funded or family-funded special needs trust. And a quick note about that, self-funded, you might hear me say first party, self-funded, first party, those terms are interchangeable. And then family-funded and third party are interchangeable as well. So we'll talk about how to disperse from that. And then with that goes the disbursement process. On our end, what are the steps that actually happen for a disbursement to be completed? Some reasons for a disbursement to be disapproved. And we will go over these just to help you understand what we're looking for in the disbursement and the quickest way and the best chance for a disbursement to be approved. And then we'll also talk about budgeting. Now, before we start, just a little disclaimer, no real life disbursement request approval decisions will be made during this presentation. Every disbursement request is evaluated on a case-by-case basis, and only the director, the trust director, Tia, approves disbursement requests. So I'm your point of contact. Allie and I are your points of contact for any disbursement questions you have and the actual disbursements. But for this presentation, we won't be doing any specifics. We'll just be going over general trends and the process. So let's start off. What can a special needs trust pay for? The answer quickly is a whole bunch. I know that doesn't really illustrate too much, but that's a simple way of saying it. This trust can pay for a whole lot. And a little more fleshed out there, a special needs trust can pay for anything that is for the benefit of the individual with disability, otherwise known as the beneficiary. A special needs trust must also align with the beneficiary's public benefits requirements, the trust plan or the letter of intent, and or the grantor's wishes. Must also align with the beneficiary's needs and their budget plan. These are all things that we'll go through briefly in the presentation. But put simply, that's what the trust is for, and that's how the funds can be used. So I thought it would be fun kind of to go through the ABCs of examples of what a trust could pay for, can be used for. I try to get one for every letter. We'll see how it goes. So first, assistive technology. A motorized wheelchair, when not covered by insurance, is one example. Auto, you can purchase a new or used vehicle, the maintenance and the repairs that go along with it. Also the monthly insurance bill, or if it's billed 6 months, it's all possible that way. Books, if you're into reading like I am, then books can also be a part of possible expenses. Cell phone bills, the device itself and the monthly bill. Clothing, that's a general term there, but there's a little more nuanced than that, but clothing can be used, or clothing can be purchased. Companion care, A part-time personal assistant, for example, if you're going to a ball game and you need someone to go with you and they're not covered by insurance, I have to put that disclaimer on a lot of these, then the trust can help pay for that, as well as dental services when not covered by insurance. Again, I'm going to keep on saying that. I just want to make sure it's known for each of these. When it's not covered by insurance, the trust can help with that. Education, if you want to take some classes, post-secondary education classes, that can be possible as well. Eye care, eye exams, the glasses, contacts, again, we're not covered by insurance. Furnishings for a new apartment or your current apartment, but if you need a new couch, that could be possible. Groceries, now this is important to note that it's not for SSI or SNAP recipients. The trust is here, and we'll go into this in more detail later, but SSI is intended for food in part, so the trust ought not supplant those benefits. House cleaning, weekly or monthly cleaning service with invoices from an independent contractor or laundry service. Here's where it gets a little tough. J's and K's are a little tough. Insurance premiums, auto, dental, and medical. Internet service, your Verizon bill, your Xfinity bill. If you're really into jigsaw puzzles, that is possible if it's part of your trust plan. And if you, if that is what the grantor's wishes were and you're really good at them, can help for those expenses. Keys, kazoos, if you really are into, if you have a talent and you want to practice that, then even kazoos could be covered by your special needs trust. Lamps, monthly fees. Now, about monthly fees, every funded trust has monthly fees, and basically the trust would pay for those fees. Medications and co-pays, again, when not covered by insurance. Nursing, if you have a temporary visiting nurse, for example, as well as oxygen, both when not covered by insurance. Pet supplies, I always like it when our clients, when I help clients get the litter for their cat. I just think that's very, it's an important thing. It's just very fun, different from other disbursements. I love pets, I love dogs and cats as well, so that's very fun when those happen. Professional services, if you need an accountant or an attorney or psychotherapist, whoever can offer services to you that are not covered by insurance or otherwise, then trust could help pay for that. Q-tips, I know Q is really hard. I feel like I cheated with Q-tips. Might change that to quills if you have a talent in calligraphy and you again, it's in your trust plan that expenses for quills to practice your talent, then even quills could be part of eligible expenses. Recreation, that kind of leads into recreation, art classes, tickets to the circus, gym memberships, self-storage units, particularly for temporary, for evicted or transitioning clients. Taxes, real estate, real property, federal and state income taxes. Your public benefits will be considered for those. Transportation. A lot of our clients will take the metro regularly or Uber, and the trust helps cover those expenses, and that also leads into travel. Utility bills, Dominion Energy, Pepco, public benefits will be considered for those as well. Veterinary care, watches, x-rays when not covered by insurance. I really wanted to put xylophones in there on a similar point in the past. Xylophones are just fun. If you have a talent, then great, perfect. Also yarn, if you're really into knitting, and zebra print pants. I had to get a Z. I couldn't really think of anything else, but even zebra print pants could be paid for by your trust. Okay, so general rules about disbursements. Anything in excess may be questioned. For example, do you really need 5 pairs of sunglasses in 1 year, or 3 pairs of winter boots? Would it be better for the money to be spent on 1 pair that lasts a lot longer? A new $500 smartphone every 6 months or a year? These things will be questioned and considered for each case. Now, an important note, I want to emphasize this one, is that any non-medical expense over $300 must be pre-approved by the trust department. unless otherwise approved. The point of this is simply $300 is a significant amount of money, and it requires more consideration. So to have it pre-approved, that the trust would cover that expense is an important step in the disbursement process. Now, smarter, more frugal alternatives will be encouraged. For example, for transitioning to affordable, accessible long-term housing, rather than continuing to pay exorbitant rent. If you're staying at a motel in the interim, looking for more affordable housing, we will help you with that, but it would be better for the trust to be used for long-term affordable housing rather than continued stay at that hotel or motel. Using safe, accessible public transportation options rather than taxis when possible. Another example of more frugal alternatives. Another thing, disbursement requests received for individuals who have been exploited in the past will be carefully scrutinized. We see this a number of times that vulnerable individuals might be taken advantage of by a relative or a friend that they don't know. All of a sudden, you know, my cousin will come to me and say, "Hey, I haven't talked to you in years, but I just found out that you have a lot of money in your trust. Let's be best friends." You know, those kinds of examples will help out to make sure that the beneficiary is not taken advantage of there. Gifts for beneficiaries, relatives, and friends will not be approved for self-funded trust or first-party trusts. The trust plan will be considered when dispersing from family-funded trusts. So gifts can be given from family-funded trusts if it's stated so in the trust plan. However, self-funded trusts are for the sole benefit of the beneficiary. Therefore, gifts to relatives would not be eligible expenses. The special needs trust is primarily used to supplement government benefits, Medicaid, Medicare, Medicaid waivers, SSI, SSDI, and the like. Tia always says that the trust is there to supplement, not supplant the benefits. So it's important for the benefits to be used as they ought to be used, and then the trust is there to help with remaining expenses. Okay, so to sum up, the trust is for the benefit of the beneficiary and can only be used to pay for reasonable and legitimate expenses. To sum up, there you go. So now for the next section, we'll talk about the actual disbursement process. To start, the primary representative, and this can also include the beneficiary themselves, you will complete and submit a disbursement request form. You will also submit supporting documentation. That will be a bill, an invoice, a receipt. You'll include that with the request for a complete request, and you are responsible for ensuring appropriate documents are submitted and received by a trust department, and the form is fully completed. If the request is complete, it is legitimate and for the benefit of the beneficiary and follows the trust plan, then we'll move on to the next step. Now that stage is us. That's the trust department. That's what Allie and I work on every day, all day, to make sure that the requests that we receive follow these requirements, these basically check boxes. And if it all looks good, then we'll move on to the next stage, which it goes to the director of trust, Tia. She reviews and approves or disapproves the request. If she notices that there's additional information that's required, depending on the nature of the request, she'll let us know. So it'll basically move back a step, and you'll hear from Allie or I to get that supporting documentation. An example of this, and we'll get into more examples later, but a quick example would be if there's insufficient supporting documentation. Basically what you had sent isn't quite enough. We don't really know if it actually is for your benefit, for example, then it'll go back and we can work together to bring it back up that step. And if it's finally approved, the request is sent to Key Bank for payment. Key Private Bank, as our trustee, sends a check to the appropriate party. And there are different methods for payment to be sent, but that completes that disbursement. So now I have a copy of our disbursement request form zoomed in just to see the top part, which you're responsible in filling out completely. To start at the top, you'll see the beneficiary name, the check payee, who the check is being mailed to or who is being made out to, who is receiving payment, where that check is going, whether that's to the check payee or to someone else, where are we sending this check, the amount, the total amount, summed up from all of the supplement documents. What's the total amount? How much is the check for? Any check memo that needs to be included. For example, if it's your it's an invoice for utility and you need your account number to be included on the check, that's where you would put that so that we can include that on the check. And the purpose of the request, a quick summary of why you're sending this to us. The date needed, most people will put ASAP, as soon as possible, or if there's a definitive date that it is absolutely needed by, you can put that there. Your participant number and account number are unique to the beneficiary. You'll have these in the documents that once the trust is established and funded and active and ready to go, you'll have these numbers available. If you don't have them now, but they are there, then you can contact us and we can provide those. An important note is we ask that you check off whether you receive Medicaid or SSI. It's important to remember that SSI recipients ought not use their trusts to pay for food, shelter, or direct reimbursement. And you telling us what you receive is important. It's a quick way for me, and I check this just to make sure, but if you tell me that you receive SSI, then and you're requesting for rent, then this requires more consideration. I'm going to read this note section, parts of it, just so that we're all on the same page.
Kevin, excuse me, I'm going
Sure.
to jump in real fast before you read that, because that is an important section and I don't want to interrupt you then. Sure. So where the trust ought not be used for food and rent if the person has SSI. As Kevin said, if there is SSI involved, we'll still consider the request because we look at the corpus of the trust, so how much money is in the trust, and if there's a way to assist in paying for these things. Sometimes if the people are eligible for an ABLE account, for example, we'll recommend they set up an ABLE and we'll transfer the money for room and board into the ABLE, and then they can pay for it out of the ABLE account in Virginia without having to report it. Now, it varies from region to region and from state to state. It shouldn't, because it's Social Security is federal law, but that's just how it works. But just so you know that transfer out of the trust to an ABLE wouldn't jeopardize the SSI. Not jeopardize it, but I should say reduce it. But if we're using the trust to pay for room and board and there is SSI, it's reportable to Social Security and they may reduce the SSI by 1/3. So we always look at how much is in the trust, what the trust is meant for, and whether or not the benefits would be affected. Thank you, Kevin. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, thank you. It is very nuanced there, and so I appreciate you explaining that further. Now I'll go into the notes section. For each business day, disbursement requests are processed in the order in which they are received by the Foundation of the Arc of Northern Virginia, and complete and legible. Again, that's supporting documentation. The form is filled out properly. All the it's legible. It's easy to read. Complete and legible disbursement requests with sufficient supporting documentation will be reviewed within 8 business days of receipt. Because of the volume of requests, we are saying 8 business days of receipt, and we'll go into why this time frame is our operating time frame a little later. But just know that within 8 business days of receiving it, it will be reviewed by TIA. Emergency situations, however, will be addressed individually. And I'll bring that up again in just a second. Generally, once the ARC sends the disbursement request to the trustee, key bank, the key bank will process the disbursement request, then print and mail the check to the payee within 5 business days. So in total, within 2 weeks of you sending it to us or us receiving it, payment, and if it's approved, payment would be sent. Disbursement requests may require additional review and or documentation. Certain expenses may require prior submission to and denial by a government agency to be considered a legitimate supplementary expense. For example, if Medicaid can pay for a new wheelchair, then they ought to. But if there's documentation saying that they will not, then the trust could come in there. But again, this is a case-by-case basis, but that's generally the policy. Ultimately, the foundation of the Arc of Northern Virginia has sole discretion regarding disbursements for the beneficiary, and that's because we are the manager of the trust. So that's the form that you'll be filling out. That's just the regular form. There's also a recurring disbursement request form that's very similar. There's just one other section asking the frequency of the payment, and we'll go into recurring a little later as well. So here we go, a regular disbursement request, the process, how to pay for items with funds from a special needs trust. Submit and complete a legible disbursement request with supporting documentation to the account manager via mail, email, fax, or walk-in. I think email is probably the most commonly used method of submitting them, but you can fax them to me, you can bring them into the office or mail them, and that all will be received that way. Now, I just want to keep on saying this, but supporting documentation is absolutely necessary for the approval. Now, here's that recurring disbursement request form. To pay for recurring expenses, such as monthly bills, complete the recurring form, attach the most recent monthly bill or invoice. And this is the important part that I want to focus on just for a second. Change the billing address to our office address. This is the quickest way and the best, most efficient way for your bills to be paid by the trust. To do that, you would change your billing address for your account. For example, your Verizon bill, log into Verizon and change the billing address to your name, then the next line, the care of the Arc of Northern Virginia, and our new address, 3060 Williams Drive, Suite 300, Fairfax, Virginia, 22031. That way, you're not still receiving the hard copy of the bill at your home and then taking a picture and emailing it to me. It just eliminates a step that's unnecessary, and it might result in delayed payments. So having them mailed to us directly will help solve that. For emergency needs, this was mentioned before, because it takes about 2 weeks for payment to be issued, that's not helpful in some cases. So if there's an emergency need, call us to report the need, whether that's an emergency car repair, you need to run to the dentist, call us during business hours, and we will help out there. We can help you obtain from someone a disbursement form and an estimate from the provider as soon as possible. That way we can review it with TIA, and should it be approved, the trust department can use the foundation's credit card to process payment immediately to the provider. And then subsequently, the beneficiary's trust would reimburse the foundation for that expense. This is not preferred, but we understand that this is, there are cases that require immediate attention, and that's one way we can do that. Now, for smaller expenses, this is kind of exciting because I love budgeting. This is a new, more developed process, thing to offer that we can offer to beneficiaries is for smaller expenses, you can use a key bank credit card or a TrueLink card. A key bank card is a credit card which can be used for monthly expenses or one-time expenses. Unique benefits of a key bank credit card are there's no monthly management fee. The credit card bill is paid from the trust directly at the end of every month. The credit card does not affect the beneficiary's credit score, and it does not affect government benefits when used for allowable expenses. And similarly, the TrueLink card is a reloadable prepaid card, which can be used for monthly or one-time expenses. So the key bank card is like a credit card, or it is a credit card. The TrueLink card is like a debit card. It's not a debit card. You can't withdraw cash, but it is like a prepaid debit card. The benefits of a TrueLink card are you can customize where the card can be accepted. There are options that we can toggle what's accepted and what's not. Like you're not allowed to go to a casino, or you can allow online purchases. It's all customizable to your needs. You can set spending limits to help with budgeting. You continuously load funds onto the card. This can be on a monthly basis. You would get $200 for transportation, for example. It will be automatically loaded onto your card. And it's approved by the Social Security Administration if the trustee is the account owner and administrator, and the trust beneficiary is the card holder. In other words, we are the account owner and administrator. That's where Allie and I come in, and we're your points of contact if you have a TrueLink card. But you are the card holder. Therefore, Social Security approves that. Comparing the two, they're very similar, just different. There might be one that's better for your needs. For the TrueLink card, the balance can be carried over. So if you don't spend the money on your TrueLink card that month, then it would be carried over into the next month. Whereas the KeyBank card, the credit line stays the same each month. For a TrueLink card, again, there's a management fee. I think it's $7 a month. KeyBank credit card is free of charge. Both are customizable for allowable expenses. And there's an online account that can be opened to monitor the card for each one. An important note, and I want to emphasize this, that cardholders must submit receipts monthly for this arrangement to continue. Basically, we need to make sure that it's being spent as intended, as defined in the trust plan, and that's just a requirement of setting up each card. And a quick note about that, submitting the receipts, you can email them to me, you can text pictures of them to me. In the same way you would send a disbursement request form, you would submit the receipts. Okay, so the next stage of the presentation, we'll go over like reasons why a request would be disapproved, and this will help us understand why or what's needed for a request. Simply, the most common way is that it's an incomplete request. That's a form without supporting documentation. Basically, if you tell me I need my bills paid, here's the total amount, just have the trust pay for it. That's not enough. Or alternatively, supporting documents are given, but not a signed disbursement request form. Hi, this is George. I need my trust paid for a new iPhone today. Thanks, see ya. You sent me the link. The trust, he just wants the trust to be paid. Yeah, supporting documentation, that's the iPhone he wants, but there's no form that's signed for it. Continue from that, disbursement form for itemized credit card statements without individual receipts for each item on the statement is another reason why it would be disapproved. Now, so we could have your trust pay for your credit card bill, but with that, we need both the statement and the receipts to match the itemized transactions. A disbursement request form with just a credit card statement without receipts for specific transactions cannot be approved. We request the individual receipts because the one-line description on the credit card statement is not sufficient to inform the trust department which expenses were incurred. For example, if you receive SSI, which is intended for rent and food, and we see on your credit card bill that you went to Giant, well, Giant is normally, well, it's a grocery store, so groceries are there. You spent $50 at Giant, but you're telling us it was just for batteries, for example. We don't know that. We would need the receipt to confirm that, to make sure that your benefits are not jeopardized there. Second most common reason to disapprove a request is asking for a cash transfer. We are not a checking account. This is not a checking account or an ATM. It's not possible to get instant cash. The trust department may not process a disbursement request and cut the check the same business day, simply because we don't cut the checks ourselves. That's our trustee KeyBank, and there's a process involved in that, and that just simply takes time. But in an emergency situation, as explained earlier, the trust department can process an urgently needed approved payment with the foundation's credit card. Top 10 examples to disapprove a request. I'll kind of give more examples to maybe help explain it. A companion expenses for a trip or a daycare for an adult without a physician stating the need. Another one, a non-wheelchair accessible vehicle to transport a beneficiary who is in a wheelchair. That simply, it's not really for their benefit. A vacuum cleaner for a house shared by 5 people. It's okay to pay for 1/5 of the cost, but there are 4 other people living there. Why should the trust be paying for the full cost? Restaurant meal for 5 people from a self-funded trust. That's kind of how we said in the beginning. A family funded might be different, but from a self-funded, the beneficiary's meal would be compensated, not the other people. Collection agencies for unpaid medical bills. The trust will pay doctors directly, but not collection agencies. Also, fees are incurred due to overdraft or a late payment by the beneficiary. Gifts for others, again, from self-funded special needs trusts may not pay for those, but if it's outlined and approved and agreed upon in the trust plan, then family funded could give gifts to others. Items parents are obligated to cover when the beneficiary is a minor, so under 18, parents are obligated to cover school supplies, seasonal clothes, shoes, food, camp electronics, but then once 18, that changes. Overcharged or double charged services. Why, we don't want to pay for things twice. We just want to make sure it's only paid for once. Another recurring overspending. If it's, if it's hard for an individual to budget and spending excessively, then we'll work together to prevent that. It's always a tough situation, but we don't want to overspend from the trust in order to prolong the life of the trust. We want it to last your lifetime. So that's why overspending is discouraged. New request before we received copies of receipts from the previous prepaid request. We just want to make sure that the money from that first request was spent as intended before we do another disbursement. The top 5 mistakes which may delay disbursement processing and incomplete supporting documentation, again. Second, expenditures from a self-funded trust, which are not solely for the benefit for the beneficiary. Third, expenditures which seem to duplicate recent prior purchases. Expenditures which do not seem to be consistent with prior spending needs and or the grantor's trust plan. What was the trust established for, and is this in alignment with that? Expenditures which can be covered by government benefits. If Medicaid can pay for things, then Medicaid ought to pay for that. But if not, then the trust can come after the fact. Next step, we're going to talk about budgeting. One of my favorite topics, just asking my wife. She doesn't really like it when I talk about budgeting, but it's one of my favorite topics. A general rule for budgeting is that the special needs trust is a lifetime legal vehicle to supplement government benefits. Just to say it again and again and again, just to make sure we're all on the same page. We want to supplement government benefits, not supplant them. So budgeting with the trust, these are pictures of the trust plan. This is what Allie and I use and Tia regularly to review a request. This is a simple way to categorize your expenses, to look at your income. If your reasonable monthly expenses exceed your monthly income, then the trust may be used to supplement your regular income. Yeah. And quick note about that, actually, if you don't have a trust plan established and you have a trust with us, Allie and I will be very happy to work with you to fill one out together. It's just important to have one established. And this isn't a legally binding document by any means. This can be edited and changed throughout, depending on if your circumstances change. Some tips for budgeting. It's important to note what your needs are versus what your wants are. I always find that my wants are a lot more than what my needs are, but it's important to first start with your needs. Set up your personal and financial goals. Again, make sure that your trust is a secondary source of income, not your primary. Get ready to budget. Organize your monthly income, keep receipts, and organize them in categories to find out in which areas you spend the most. I found out recently that my wife and I, as we said earlier, we love to cook. And we recently realized we spent a lot of money on food recently, and we're going to change that a little bit. But, you know, revisiting this on a regular basis, which categories you spend most on, just helps understand what your financial goals are, and how to change that. List your cash expenses and decide whether each one is a need or a want. And you can list your monthly and non-monthly expenses on the budget sheet. Benefits of budgeting, put simply, it helps prepare for regular expenses, plans for future unexpected expenses, can avoid excessive spending, like I just said about food. We love cooking, but maybe that was too much for that month. Reduces the stress of overspending when spending limits have been already set. Determines how much may be spent to disperse over a lifetime. Budgeting allows the trust to last for a lifetime. It helps us, the trust department, know the beneficiary's sources of income and expenses. And it supports the trust director's decision-making, and it helps us learn to avoid unnecessary expenditures. So budgeting, regardless of whether you have a special needs trust or not, has many benefits. So that's all I have for my presentation. I'm very happy to take any questions now.
Okay, so what I'll do is we have quite a few questions, so I'm going to read them to you, Kevin, and you can answer them. How's that sound?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. I want to get to the top of the list. This one. Okay, so the first question, which I already answered, Kevin, so I'm going to read it to you. It's from Linda. She said she and her husband have an irrevocable trust for their daughter as the beneficiary. It's primarily funded by a second to die life insurance policy, and there are assets in the trust. So this is more a trust specific question. Our son is the trustee of the trust. The question is, can the annual premiums for the insurance be paid from the trust assets? And that answer is yes. And I think this is a follow-up question. It says just the word education. And Kevin, can it pay for guitar lessons, art classes, etc.?
Yeah, theoretically, yes. Again, that's a case-by-case question. But if it's for the benefit of the beneficiary, again, the trust is here to help aid the well-being of the individual. And if that's not just on boring stuff like rent and utilities, it can also be used for guitar lessons and the like.
Thank you.
If it's also outlined in the trust plan.
Thank you. Mark asks, when you say when not covered by insurance, end quote, can funds be used to cover copay requirements?
Yes, it can cover that. But again, if the insurance can be paid for other services, then it ought to be used that way instead of the trust.
Yeah, I think they're just talking specifically to the copay. So yes. And then also, I assume when you refer to insurance, you're referring to anything covered by Medicare, Medicaid, and Medicare, correct?
Correct.
But you're also referring to any insurance,
any
right?
Private insurance as well, yes.
Yeah. So the private insurance is applied first, just in general, by the doctor's office. Private insurance and Medicaid, or if there's Medicare, then Medicare, private insurance, Medicaid. So whenever Kevin gets a bill, and I'm going to speak on your behalf, Kevin, what do you do when you get a bill from a doctor, for example?
Sure. When I get a bill from a doctor, I check to make sure that that beneficiary, well, we see if they receive Medicaid, or what insurance they have and what documentation we have that shows what they have. And I check to make sure that it's not covered by that insurance. And that
Right.
might require asking the beneficiary, talking to the provider themselves. And if not, then we can continue with the disbursement request.
And that's why when we're establishing the trusts, we also ask at the very beginning, when we're establishing the trust, we ask for copies of government issued photo IDs, something that says the person has a disability, and copies of their health insurance cards, all of them, including dental and vision. And when you say, so Mark wants to know these, quote, general rules, end quote, are the ARC rules imposed for managing a trust? Are the general rules our rules for managing a trust?
These are, it's both our policies, but it's also to ensure we're also following the rules of Social Security and Medicaid. Like if you can't, for SSI, for example, you cannot have $2,000 over $2,000 of assets in your name. So if you're requesting for $2,001 cash payment, that is a significant request that would jeopardize your benefits. So this is not really just us saying no to that. It's really following the rules of Social Security there. So it's kind of a combination of our policies, but based on the rules of government programs.
Right. And this, Mark, you're going to find across, you should find across any and every pooled trust program, as well as anyone managing any person. Let's say the Linda up above, she has her son as the trustee of the trust. If the beneficiary of that trust has means tested benefits, that brother should know the rules of Social Security, Medicaid, subsidized housing, or whatever, because the first question that's always, I should say the third question, the first question is this a client of ours? And the second question is the trust funded? The third question is this jeopardizing any benefits they're receiving? So these rules are based upon government agency rules and the benefits the person is receiving. These agencies can come back and ask for an account reporting of the trust. So they usually go back to the family member, the representative payee, for example, if there's Social Security or who's ever helping with the housing voucher. And the easiest thing to do is to send the account statements. That's the first thing we always say, just send the account statements. If there's pushback and they want more information, which they have the right to request, then you ask us, because we scan and save every receipt, invoice, bill, training invoice that we require you send to us, because there's that account reporting obligation by the fiduciary, key bank in our part, but we do the saving of these documents for them. There's a requirement that your trustee save the detailed information on how the funds have been spent. So it's two-pronged, right, Kevin? You have the need for the receipts and invoices if there's a look back and they want detailed information. And at the same time, we're following the rules of those benefits that people are receiving. I should say three-pronged. And then we have rules as well. Kevin, the disbursement process, if we are using the ARC for managing the trust, correct? The disbursement process you described is if you're using the ARC for managing the trust.
That's correct, yes.
And I will also say it's also for any other pooled trust program. They're going to ask you for receipts and there's a disbursement request form. It's a requirement across the board. Mm-hmm. If it's a private trust, again, Linda's son is managing the trust as a trustee, it would behoove him to keep the same type of records. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of administrative work, and there are requirements in place for a reason, because we're there to protect the beneficiary.
I just want to note there that kind of leads into why it takes time to process a disbursement request. This, like I said, this isn't a checking account where cash can be withdrawn, or this isn't something where payment can be issued very quickly. And it part of that reason is because of the documentation, saving the documents and communication between provider, beneficiary, us, like each request just takes a unique amount of time. And that's why it takes about 8 days, up to, not fully 8 days, but up to 8 days to.
Right, and those are the unusual requests. The recurring disbursements are in and out usually, especially when they're sent in care of the Arc of Northern Virginia. But Kevin, I expect Kevin and Allie to check the trust balance, to have a good idea of the trust plan, how the funds are to be spent, and to make sure that that person signing the document is actually a primary representative. Now, after a while, right, they get to know our frequent flyers, as I call them, the people that disperse regularly. They have a very good idea of who they are, and so do I, and what the balance is and whatnot. It's but it does take time because we're responsible for managing the assets. Jane asks, I have a medical request over $300 coming up at the end of September. What do I do?
So the rule or the policy is that any non-medical expense over $300 would require pre-approval. So because that's a medical expense that's coming up, that wouldn't really follow under that pre-approval requirement. You can just send us the bill after you receive it, with a disbursement request form.
But
answers.
Anytime if you know, Jane, that you have a $300 bill coming up at the end of September, if you have the documentation, send anything anyone can send in advance. Right. Is a good thing, right? Whenever we get things that are down to the wire last minute, Kevin and Allie, sometimes they're able to scurry and get it done and get it processed in a timely manner. But because we process first come, first served, we're not necessarily going through the 100 disbursements on the desk and saying, ooh, which one is due tomorrow and which one is due next week. We're like, this is the first one, this is the next one. And they roll through them in that process. So I'll ask on behalf of my excellent staff that if you have it, send it sooner than later, because that just helps to smooth things along. And
I'll also add another note, maybe this will help answer the question also, that there are clients who, if they have monthly appointments and they know that the amount is more than $300, arrangements can be made that with the provider that a bill is sent preemptively or date of service given. Arrangements can be made that way as well. Regardless, if you have supporting documentation, the earlier you send it, the better.
Right. And one thing I'll add there is that if you're going to see the dentist, for example, and they create a dental plan, we ask them to you want to ask them to break it down. And if you don't, then we ask you to, but to break it down if it's over multiple days. We don't want to mail a check to anybody for $15,000 for a service that hasn't been rendered. And every single dentist, orthodontist, et cetera, they are understanding of this and they do break it down. We also generally prefer to send let's say that 15,000 is 5,000, 5,000, 5,000 over 3 visits. Kevin does prefer to send it to the beneficiary, whomever is taking that beneficiary to the dentist. Maybe it's mom or brother or sister or whomever. So you hand carry the check in and it gets paid after the fact. Now, Kevin mentioned the TrueLink card. We can also transfer money onto the TrueLink card, but we need 24 hours notice, business day notice, in order to get that money transferred onto the card. Mm-hmm. Okay. Susan is asking, can the trust pay for expenses? And you can read along in the Q&A.
Let me see if I can.
Yeah. Susan Holler is asking, can the trust pay for expenses incurred by the beneficiary's companion when accompanying the beneficiary to events, recreation, travel, etc.? The companion is necessary for the beneficiary to be able to attend the event or to travel. This is a tricky one.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. But I would say that if there is a document from a doctor stating that it's necessary for the companion to be with you on that trip, then it could be covered there as well. There's actually someone who I'm working with to do exactly that. We just need a doctor's note, essentially, that the companion is necessary therefore the trust could be used in that regard. Tia, if you want to help me explain with that one.
Yeah, and that's just the companion part, but Susan's asking more in-depth expenses incurred by the beneficiary's companion. So I would say it depends on what those expenses are, right? If they're buying themselves beach balls and souvenirs, then no, that's not out of the beneficiary's trust.
That's
unless you specifically say in the trust plan that they can do that, but that would be very uncommon.
Yeah, I would just say if the companion is to go to a Nationals game and then the companion buys a $150 jersey because jerseys are expensive, then that's really not for the benefit of the beneficiary. However, a hot dog while at the game could be covered there.
Right. Potentially. Again, we're going to go back and look at that trust plan. Right. So none of this is like guaranteed set in stone. We all have to say, you know, after the trust documents have been reviewed. The trust plan is an integral part of the trust documents. It is a guidance document. You may change it at any time, but you're helping us to understand how you want the funds spent in the trust on behalf of the individual, or if it's a self-funded trust, the individual is telling us how they want the money spent. Hypothetically, there was a trust client, this was years ago, and she said, I love to shop. I love to shop. It's really bad. If I start shopping too much, do not approve my request. Do not give me the money because I really like jewelry and clothes. And it happened only one time, and the person was responsive to us saying no, because that's specifically what she told us needed to be done. Next question, Stephen is asking, how does pre-approval of over $300 work? Likely wouldn't have receipts such as a trip with plane fare, hotel, unless approved.
Right. So any information you can give about the request is just anything you can give. If it's a link to a product, or if it's the quote, how much the plane ticket is currently costing, if it'll change dollar amount because you purchase it the next day, then that's not unreasonable. We just need to know how much it's basically going to cost, the estimated amount, and then we'll need receipts after the fact. So once it's actually purchased, we'll need the actual amount that it costs. Yeah, I hope that answers that. Right.
So we call that, Stephen, a training invoice.
Yeah.
So you said like a trip with a plane fare, hotel, let's say. We plan on going, I always say Atlantic City or Disney, but I don't know why. But let's say we're planning on going to Niagara Falls, and we want to take the Amtrak train, and based on today's prices, it's going to cost us about this much money per person. I'd like the trust to pay for my son and myself as his companion, and the hotel costs about this. Now we're going to look at also per diem there. If you start asking for meals to be covered in hotel expenses, we usually use the government per diem guidelines for that. Yeah, so that would be just a guesstimation, right, of what you plan on spending. And I will say that this is this $300 pre-approval is for client, especially when we're just getting to know the client and learning their spending habits and knowing how much is in the trust and making sure that there's an understanding of what the trust funds are meant for, what you've told us, and the spending, and then that budget that Kevin so loves to create, making sure people stay within that budget. So after we've gotten to know the client and know that they're not going to, because this does happen on occasion, but maybe some client puts in for $1,000 every single month to buy stuff, right? So we have to say, sorry, no, you can't just buy $1,000 worth of stuff to spend money. Long-winded answer, but there are certain clients that we know are being responsible, for lack of a better word, and other ones that don't have a good understanding of money management. And that's when we're really supporting those that are trying to make the larger requests for what we would deem either unnecessary, I hate to say unnecessary items, but a waste of their money.
It would be better suited for the trust spent otherwise.
Right. So Eleanor asks, hello, Eleanor, what about SSDI? Does it have the same restrictions?
That's a good question. It's different than SSI because SSI is means tested, as I understand it. SSDI, there's no restriction on the Like there's not that $2,000 threshold that you have to be under. Yeah, it's just a different requirement. So if you are filling out the form, you can check no on SSI, and next to it you can say SSDI. That would help us understand the benefits. But just know that the benefits are different. It is kind of confusing, but they are different.
And Social Security isn't coming to us or you if there's SSDI involved to ask for an account reporting of the trust. But again, the trustee has a fiduciary responsibility. So if someone else came to ask how the funds were spent, for example, pre-pandemic, a person was made the guardian of an individual, and they came back and asked for a full account reporting of how the trust was spent. Now, thank goodness the person wasn't a big spender. There were maybe only 3 to 5 disbursements a year over 5 years. So we weren't compiling, hundreds and hundreds of documents, because those were really hard. We did that for another client, and it was very difficult to save all of those. We ended up having to put them on a CD because it was, that what they were still called? Yeah, CD, because we couldn't email them or anything. But anyway, because the trustee has that fiduciary responsibility, we still require receipts, invoices, training invoices, bills as supporting documentation. Riza asks, my brother had this trust set up to prevent the removal of his supplemental security income. However, within a year or so of his trust, his SSI was taken away. Is that something that should have happened? The answer is no, that should not have happened. So if they stopped providing the SSI, they would have had to send you a letter and see what that letter says. You can send us the letter and a copy of that letter where they say why they stopped the SSI. And then we have, it's also on the Social Security Administration website, but if you ask us for it, we have a release of information form that is a Social Security document that you can complete and send to the regional office or the local office to find out, to get more information. So the quick answer is copy and send us, see why they stopped it and send us a copy. I'm going to answer this one. It's from Robert. Can the ARC serve as a representative payee for Social Security income? The answer is no, we do not serve as representative payee. Stephen Smith asks, how do you interact with supported providers and their sponsoring companies?
I think the question might be, do we interact or communicate with providers directly on behalf of the beneficiary? If it's if the primary representative or beneficiary themselves state that we can, then I will, but we do not disclose any information about the account to providers about disbursements.
Right. Elaine wants to know, are cigarettes considered food?
My understanding is no.
Teresa asks, is disbursement by check? Oh, here we go. You have this. Here's where you get to explain it all. Is disbursement by check the only disbursement option? Question 1.
Thank you, Teresa. Great question. No, that's not the only option. That's the most common option. But we can do direct deposits into accounts. A lot of providers themselves prefer a direct deposit for services given. A direct deposit into the beneficiary's account or whoever is making the request. Another
beneficiary's account only when they
disclosure
means as the benefits.
Right. Yes. Yeah. You have to say it each time. Yeah. Electronic transfers. Yes, that's an option. Trying to think of other
card.
Yeah, the TrueLink card, the KeyBank card, also gift cards is another option. Again, if the person does not receive SSI or means tested benefits. Yeah. So there are many ways for payment to be issued.
So by check, by direct deposit into the provider's account, for example, we can pull money from accounts, which we wouldn't do in this situation, but we can also push money. That's the direct deposit. The reloadable debit card, the TrueLink card that Kevin's speaking of, is a commonly used card. So I'll give an example. Kevin, my daughter used to get $200 on her card before the pandemic because she needed it for transportation. As you can imagine, I was hesitant to give her that card, and because she has SSI, and she said, well, what about movie tickets? And what about the movies? And I said, you could buy tickets, but you can't buy food. And I gave her the card, and the next day she walked down the steps with the card in her hand, and she said, transportation and movie tickets, no food. And I said, you got it, baby. And she did. And only one time in the many years that she had that card did she use it for food. And it was when she was in Minnesota visiting, which is allowable on occasion. But that's, I think, one of the most empowering options the trusts offer is that reloadable card, because there's $200 on it at the end of the month. She takes pictures of the receipts, for example, and sends them in, or in the olden days, we'd save them and tape them to a piece of paper. And if she needed more money on the card, like she was going on vacation, I could say to Kevin, as the primary representative on her trust, or she as a primary representative on her trust can say to Kevin, I'm going on vacation to my aunt's. I'd like you to add another $300, so I have $500 on my card this month.
And you can do that request with a disbursement request form. In that case, there's no supporting documentation to give, just stating that the check payee, instead of a check being sent, it's for your TrueLink card reload.
Right. And that might be also on a recurring disbursement request. So hers was a recurring disbursement request. Kevin, or whomever it was then, it was Trini at the time, was able to go in and up the request using that recurring disbursement request, because we had checked variable, meaning even though we wanted 200 every month, it could vary at times. So, and then there's the KeyBank card, which is another form of payment, where there's the, what did you call it, Kevin? There's a balance, a maximum.
So there's a credit limit. It's a credit card. So there's a credit limit, and then the trust pays off the balance at the end of the month, so that the balance would go back to zero. And so that's a fixed amount. You can change the credit amount. You can request that amount be changed through a disbursement request form. But it is fixed that way. That answers.
And then the last thing that I can think of is the fact that we have the foundation credit card. So where Kevin said he liked buying the cat food for cats, he'll go online to some store, I won't name it, and maybe buy the cat food and kitty litter, and it gets delivered to the person's front door. Or somebody wants to buy an iPhone case, and they send Kevin the link to some famous website that's selling these, and Kevin can use the foundation card to do that. Or emergency situations, somebody's at the dentist with a abscess and they call and say, can you pay my bill? And then Kevin says, yes, of course, and gets their billing department on the phone. So there are many ways.
One more I was going to add is bill pay for participating vendors like Verizon, or bigger names. I don't know if I'm allowed to say.
You can say it, I'm just joking.
Nationwide providers like Verizon, Xfinity. They have options where it's not a check that's sent to their PO box and then deposited to your account, paying off the balance. It's a bill pay. It's an electronic transfer of funds.
And those are very convenient. Yeah, there are over 3,000 companies nationwide that are on that list. And so anytime Kevin and his team can use that, they do that as well, because we get the Verizon bill in, boom, it gets scanned, it gets sent to Fiona, boom, Fiona puts in an Excel spreadsheet, boom, she sends it to Kevin, he sends it to KeyBank, and the money's out. And the good thing is, within 3 days, we know whether or not the bill has been paid. Back in the olden days when they didn't offer that and we sent a check, I can't tell you the number of times that they applied the check to the wrong account, despite all the information on the check. So that's been a great improvement. Elaine asks, and I'll do this, do these include an investment aspect, or do you just hold money like a bank and spend it down? So Elaine, there are 8 investment options from which to choose. They go from conservative to aggressive. If someone is eventually transferring around $250,000 or more, if it's uninvested, then you can customize that investment with our financial advisor at KeyBank. If it's already invested and you want to keep those investments, any commonly traded stock may be transferred in kind from wherever you have it invested over into the trust. You can roll inherited IRAs into a trust. So KeyBank, at no cost to you, opens a separate trust, a conduit trust that holds that IRA on family funded inherited trust that can roll into it. So yeah, it's definitely invested. It's active investment management. And the foundation of the Arc of Northern Virginia, which is a separate nonprofit that oversees the trust program, and our endowment, they meet either every other month or monthly, depending on the market's activity, to discuss the investments and potentially change. So for example, I think it was last year where the market wasn't doing so well. Let's just, I'm making this up, I don't know exactly, but let's say the balanced account is 40 to 60% in equity, in stocks. Everything was moved to the low end of that. So if you selected a balanced account, 40% of that was invested in stocks. In a good year, KeyBank pushes it all over to the other end, the high end, so 60% was invested in stocks. And then again, like I said, our foundation has some very savvy people on the board who talk to them and discuss investments regularly. And then, for example, during the pandemic, there were actually more meetings. We were having more meetings and there was more communication because of the situation. So you do get to select an investment option, or if it's around 250,000 or more, may privately select transfer in kind, whatever you prefer. Ian wants to know, for the TrueLink and KeyBank card receipts, do you prefer to receive the receipts as they occur or in a monthly batch?
It's a really good question, Ian. I think it's best for everyone involved, for you to send them, for us to receive them as you get the receipt, to send it to us as quick as possible. I think it's so easy to lose a small piece of paper in your pocket or in the car or wherever. It's better to send them as you receive them. Then we compile them at the end of the month. But if it's preferred on your end to send it in one batch, if it's easier to do it that way, then that's fine as well. So either one can be done. But if there is an option, I think we would prefer it as they occur.
Kevin, when you say, I want to make sure that Ian and you have the same understanding of the word batch. Do you like to receive an envelope stuffed with receipts, or would you prefer them taped to a piece of paper?
That's a very good question to you. No, I think, yeah, I do not prefer them in an envelope, just stuffed into an envelope, simply because it takes extra time to unravel them, put them on a piece of paper, tape them so that I can scan it in our scanner. It's much easier if that's already done. That's one way where teamwork makes the dream work. If you can do that part, then we can do our job a lot quicker as well. So to answer your question that way. Now, an electronic copy would be even easier. If you're able to take a picture and email those receipts, email those pictures of the receipts, then that's also preferred. There are a lot of methods of doing that, and
all our staff members and the trust team have cell phones. I got everybody's cell phones at the very beginning of the pandemic, and we've continued that. The numbers have changed because we've switched plans, but for those emergency, and I hate to say this, Kevin and Allie, but I am going to say it, those emergency situations on the weekend, your car breaks down in Stafford, you're at the mechanics and he insists on payment, of course. If you text Kevin or Allie and explain that, I'm going to say 8 times out of 10, because I don't want to say 9, that they'll text me and say, hey, Joe's car broke down in Stafford and we need to pay. Can I use the foundation card? So we are available. If you're calling him to say you're walking on the beach and it's a lovely day and you're just thinking of him, he'll listen to the voicemail, but probably will not respond to that. So just, but people I don't think have been abusing the fact that you guys have cell phones. So that's really nice.
No, I think it's actually easier. Now that I have the cell phone, it is easier in some cases for people to text me a picture of it, and then I'm able to quickly upload it to the file.
And we will start, we're about to start this before the pandemic, but now once we get moved in, maybe starting in September, we're going to have tape receipts on Thursdays, or I forget what the clever name is we came up with, but like the third Thursday of the month, we're going to invite our clients that want to come in and sit down and tape receipts in the office to do that. I'm also going to invite those people that want to volunteer to tape other people's receipts that did get sent in envelopes to some scrap paper, you know, some used paper that we have, so that that can get organized, because it does, believe it or not, take a lot of time to tape down these receipts so that we can scan them. I'll be quiet now and read the next question. John asks you, Kevin, if you have a credit card or TrueLink card, do you require receipts for every purchase regardless of how small the purchase might be. For example, would you need to submit a receipt for a $4 expense at Sweet Frog?
So thank you for the question, John. We do need all receipts, even though it's a $4 expense. I understand, but we require all receipts. Again, if you spent $4 at Giant, and we see that it's at Giant, we don't know whether that was for food or for batteries, for example. It's best to know every dollar. We're an accounting team, so we like to keep.
And again, we say we mean the ARC and the trustee, right? Again,
Right.
that fiduciary responsibility falls on Key Bank. And so at the end of let's just say that $4 receipt wasn't sent in 10 times over 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
How much is that? $4,800 or $400, something like that.
Yeah.
So that would be a big gap in somebody's reporting, financial reporting, right? And that would raise eyebrows. So
it's good.
It's not, sorry, Kevin, we're not trying to be difficult.
Right.
We're trying to follow the rules. Go ahead.
And
Kevin.
it's also just good to create that habit. Send it as you get it. That way you don't have that issue.
And Raisa says, are trust plans to be updated yearly, or is it a one-time kind of thing?
I think we prefer it yearly. That's a very good question. That way it's updated regularly, and things that change your financial situation can be, we know about and are able to help. It's not required. Again, like I said, it's not a legally binding document, so it's always able to be updated.
And Jane asks, what do you mean by an unnecessary trip? What makes for a vacation? I think I said that. So unnecessary trip, maybe I said that. I don't know. Like if somebody wants to go to Las Vegas 10 times a year, right? And their trust really can't handle that type of expense because the idea was for the trust to last as the lifetime of the person or as much as possible. What makes for a vacation? Leaving home. 50 miles or further away from home is generally, that's whenever you can use the trust for food, if there's SSI involved and they consider it a vacation fund. So, yeah. Alex Barnes says, will there always be an annual fee for the preparation and distribution of a tax letter by KeyBank? Yes. If the money, so yes and no. If the money is in, if you contribute seed money, $300, $1,000, $1,500 in seed money, that's just there to plant the seed to grow the trust. That goes, we put that in a cash account so that it does not generate a taxable event. But once it starts being used, then a taxable event is incurred, then there's a $40 annual tax preparation fee. So the first 4 years, KeyBank waived the tax preparation fee, and now it's $40 per year, which I always half jokingly say is about $610 less than what my CPA charges. So the $40 is really, 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 really inexpensive. I know that it came on after 4 years, and it may have surprised some people, but yeah, that tax prep is what they do. And you can well imagine if you do your own taxes, it's definitely more than a $40 event to apply the federal deduction. If it's applicable, look at gains and losses, distributions, contributions, deduct fees, send it all to the IRS. And if the IRS responds, send out that check again. John wants to know, with respect to things that should be covered by insurance, there are times when trying to get insurance to pay for something is impractical or exhausting. Assuming the expense would not imperil the financial health of the trust, would the trust pay for an expense when the insurance coverage is in dispute or being contested by the insurance agency? I'll take that one, Kevin. Mm-hmm. So, would the trust pay for an expense when the insurance company? The short answer is most likely, right? I can't give a definite yes or no. We always ask for the supporting documentation. So if you show us that you've been disputing this and this is what's going on, but the person really needs this motorized wheelchair or whatever it is, then most likely we would put in a letter, we would send a letter saying, we've discussed this, this is what you've told us, based on the information provided, we've approved this on a one-time basis, right? So we want to make sure that there's a letter explaining what we understand you're telling us and how we've interpreted it and why we've agreed to make the payment. So yeah, we have done that on occasion.
But it's very case specific. Yeah.
Exactly. Very case. That's why it also takes a little bit longer than to just write a check, right? I know trustees of private trusts, they have that checkbook and they just write the checks and hand it over, write the check and hand it over. There's a little bit more involved on our end, making sure that all aspects have been looked at. Ian wants to know if a live-in care attendant is required by federal law to have a smartphone to log into an app to track their physical location and to track how many hours they work. Would the SNT cover any percentage of the cell phone plan that is tied to the attendant's cell phone? That's going to be up to, if it's a family funded trust, if the grantor approves that, wants that to happen, I'd say yes, right, Kevin? And if it's a self-funded or first-party trust, it's the individual's money, then I would probably say, again, the grantor, the beneficiary would make that request. It's going to require that the attendant provide their cell phone bill monthly.
Yeah. So it's another step in the process that might delay things.
Right. But the short answer is most likely. That seems like it's reasonable. Physical location, how will the SNT cover a percentage of the self? Yeah, and that's, it's real because it would be used daily, and it's really probably used only twice a day, right? When they check in and when they check out, unless you have a couple of attendants coming during one day, which I've known to be true with my own daughters. So I'll say probably, again, we can't give definite answers without seeing the documentation, but most likely. And Sarah wants to know, we are just setting up our trust. I think it might be a family funded trust as my son doesn't receive federal benefits. I would like to read more about how that distinction impacts what we have heard about today. Sorry, knew too much of this. So it's not, the type of trust is dependent upon from where the money is coming. So a family funded trust is anybody's money but the beneficiaries. A self-funded trust is the beneficiary's money. That's the difference between the two. So there are two questions that I ask if people are on the fence as to where to establish the trust. I say, who do you want to manage and administer the trust in the long term? Because when you set it up front, we don't have much to do as parents. It just sits there, right? We're funding it upon our death, maybe. So who do you really want to manage and administer it when you're gone? And then the second question is, from where is the money coming? Is it from your last will and testament, a life insurance policy that you have, and you want to have the trust as the beneficiary? Is it your retirement accounts? Or is it the beneficiary's money? Did they play the lottery and just won and now it has to go into a trust? Or is it a settlement because there was an accident, they sued, and the victim won? So that's what it comes down to. Trust Talk Tuesdays are a good place to start, as well as our website that has a lot of good short and very long videos. And our website, right, Kevin? Where else can we look? And then the ARC YouTube site. Mark wants to know, does the ARC only manage trusts that the ARC creates?
We only manage trusts that are part of our program. If there is a trust that was established elsewhere but decanted into a trust with us, I'm going to defer to Tia and my coworker Rihanna on that, because I don't handle that aspect. But yes, we only handle trusts that we are managers of.
Right, that are on our paperwork, so to speak. And right, people can decant, Virginians can decant to a trust, to our trust. Marylanders or people in DC or anywhere else, it may take a court order, or the trust document may provide authority to move the funds into a trust with us. Robert wants to know, is SSI and SSDI handled differently? If you mean in regards to trust disbursements, then Kevin, what do you say?
Yes. SSI is means tested and intended for rent, food, and clothing. But I think that clothing part is removed. Is that correct to you?
Yes.
So yes, SSI, we don't want the trust to pay for that if the we don't want to pay for those categories if the SSI is intended for that. SSDI is not given in that way. It's not meant for those things. So it's considered differently.
Right. So SSI, again, as Kevin said, it's primarily meant for room and board. It can be used on anything once that person's room and board has been met. But if you make a request out of the trust that is room and board, and under room, Social Security describes that there are 10 items under room, such as rents, utilities, garbage removal, homeowners insurance, some renters insurance, etc. But if the trust, let's just say the rent is, if the rent is $400 a month, we say use the SSI to pay the rent. Don't even bother going into the trust. Send other bills for the trust to pay. Recurring phone bills, recurring transportation or not, clothing, house plants, whatever. If the rent is $1,500 and there's sufficient funds in the trust and you're okay with reporting that to Social Security and they reduce the SSI by 1/3, we'll agree to that. Or if the person was found disabled under the age of 26, and then we'd recommend an ABLE account so we could transfer the money, the rent money, to the ABLE account. It's then up to the person managing that ABLE account to make sure that the rent gets paid, though. Once that money is out of the trust, then it's up to who's ever managing the ABLE. Social Security disability has no restrictions. So that means that using the trust, the only restrictions are that it's legal legitimate for the benefit of the individual and signed by a primary representative, and how you wanted the funds to be spent. Alex says, we received a letter from a letter that the fee is $40 for the preparation of the 2020 fiduciary taxes. So $40 every year, in addition to the monthly fee. Yes, so the monthly fee is 0.12% of the corpus of the trust, and then $40 for tax prep. But Alex, if yours has seed money in it and it's not an investment, let me know, okay? And then maybe, Kevin, you can make a note to see what the balance is in Alex Barnes's trust. Because since they implemented this in 2021, and it's funny, I haven't gotten this letter and I have 2 trusts. So I need to figure out where that letter is. Maybe that's the letter downstairs that I haven't opened yet. But anybody with seed money, there shouldn't be a tax prep fee. It's only the trusts that are funded outside of seed money. So yeah, the $40 a year. So, which isn't unusual, Alex. And maybe you're not asking that, you're just asking for clarification, but there's an administrative fee, the combined annual trustee and management fee, and then once a year for the tax preparation. Okay, we're going to see how many, we have a couple more. Oh my God, we have a lot of questions. So when it comes to taking trips, Riza wants to know, I would like to know, how are things paid for in regards to companions or caregivers that assist my brother? For example, he has severe CP and relies on someone else to do everything for him. Would a medical necessity letter for assistance be required? So let me jump in, Kevin. So I'm assuming that your brother has, I'm going to, Riza, you can unmute. Is he, I can't remember, is he in Virginia? Because if he's in Virginia, my guess is that he also has a Medicaid waiver, and Medicaid is paying for both attendant care and companion care. So in this scenario, whatever Medicaid is paying for, maybe that person is going on vacation with them, they're already getting paid through them, right? If your brother needs 24/7 care, then yeah, we'd like to have a medical necessity letter. Only because if Medicaid comes back and says, why is the trust paying for something that Medicaid pays for, we can say, well, the waiver is only paying for 80 hours a week, and this person needs 120 hours a week. Go ahead, Riza.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
ma'am.
Okay, perfect. I was having some trouble unmuting myself. So when it comes to that, he actually doesn't have Medicaid at all. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Virginia Birth Injury Program.
Yes.
So they actually allow him to have caregivers, and they pay them, 40
Right.
hours a week, that kind of thing. And it's a bit tricky with them because, for example, I am a caregiver for my brother. My mother is a caregiver as well. However, we cannot work during the same times.
Right.
So like, I have to do 8 hours and then she has to come in and do her 8 hours. Like two caregivers can't be on at the same time.
Right.
So I guess my question is, would the expenses of the companion or the caregiver be paid for? Or would they have to figure out their own accommodations?
No. So so a medical necessity letter would be good to have.
Okay.
The expectation from the trust side would be that mom uses 8 hours, sister uses 8 hours, and if he needs another 8 hours, then that could potentially be out of the trust if the doctor says 24/7 care.
Okay.
If you're going on vacation together, your brother has to have a room, right? So
exactly.
if in that room with him, we're not asking, right?
Okay.
So if you guys get a room with 2 double bed, whatever you do, right? You just want to run it by us first, because we have had clients who have gone and bought, first class round trip tickets to the Philippines that ended up costing the client $13,000 a person. After the fact, having to deal with that was a little tricky, but that's why we say, let us know in advance.
Okay.
And yes, a vacation can be paid for directly from the trust. So it can be prepaid and disbursement request. It really depends on what you're comfortable with. You'd work directly with Kevin. So if you guys knew that you were going to, give me somewhere new.
So let's say that we wanted to do something international.
Yes.
Let's say we wanted to go to Mexico, but my brother has restrictions on, like, he can't sit on an airplane seat the way that we can. It's just physically impossible. We've tried it before and it was very, very bad.
Yeah.
So we have thought about perhaps driving there. It's a super long drive.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be appropriate for him to sit in his wheelchair for an extended amount of time. So we have thought of the idea of like, hey, can we rent an RV and use that to transport him? Would that be something that the trust would be able to pay for?
So that's a unique situation. We'd have to evaluate that in a one-on-one conversation with you, because it's a first party trust where the funds have been irrevocably assigned for the primary benefit of your brother. So we'd want to have a conversation with you. Again, I can tell you that RVs aren't really the way to go, because if you travel 150 miles, more than 150 miles a day, you're paying a hefty dollar price per mile after that. I've looked into this. Yeah. So just be aware of that. But yes, that's a potentiality, but we'd want to talk to you about it, because the expectation would be, not to get the luxury van that Aerosmith gets, RV that Aerosmith gets, but one that's more appropriate for the number of people traveling.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. And then either
perfect.
pre or post, both, prepayment or post payment, both work. It's things like this for everybody that's still on. This may take a little bit more time than 1 week, right, to get an answer to. So if you plan on going in September, start the discussion a month in advance, right?
Right. Okay, perfect. That's super good to know.
Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Stephen wants to know, Anthem, my son has Anthem Healthkeepers. Dental services are part of that, but we have found that not many providers accept it, and those that do are not convenient. Is there any option for paying for dental with private dental service? Yes. Private dental service, not part of the Anthem. Yes. Now you'd have to, right? You're going to have to buy that private dental service, right? So I know that you can get supplemental dental. We get stuff in the mail often, but yeah. Anonymous wants to know, for recurring monthly expenses such as phone invoices, can the ARC make payments using EBT rather than mailing checks, since EBT seems more efficient? It depends on the company. right? So
Yes.
some of those are now on the national list, right, Kevin?
Right. Yeah, if they're on the list where that electronic transfer funds, I don't know if EBT, electronic transfer of funds, if they are a participating provider on that list, then yes, absolutely. That's definitely preferred.
Exactly. And then if we were to do EBT, they'd have to, that other end, right, that company, if they weren't on that national list, they'd have to provide us with their account information so the monies could be transferred. They are not allowed to pull from your trust, but we can push to their account. Ronald wants to know, I'm concerned with the time frame involved to get funds to my son for ordinary daily living. Can a set amount be distributed to him on a monthly basis for living expenses?
Good question, Ronald. I think maybe in this case, maybe we'll have a discussion afterward, but a TrueLink card might be an option because that way the funds could be available next business day for living expenses. But regardless, I think we would like to establish a trust plan to determine how much per month for daily living expenses and whether a TrueLink card is a good option.
And the trust plan includes the budget.
Right.
And Ronald, so you know, we have clients that have money transferred once a month to the TrueLink card. We have clients that have money transferred on a weekly basis, and we have one client that gets it on a daily basis. So we know that there are different people manage money differently. So yeah, so the best thing I think is the TrueLink card. Go ahead, Kevin.
And another thing is, another option of funding is if you're billed for your Verizon bill, for example, on the 7th of the month, every month, if it's set up that way, then it could be set that a fixed amount is loaded onto TrueLink card by the 6th of the month so that it's available on the 7th to pay. And there's actually a couple clients who do that thing for a number of different bills. So their therapist bill, fixed amount every time on the 13th of the month. And then also the 21st gets a funding. So it's very customizable, the TrueLink.
Right.
That's a good option.
So Jane wants to know who to talk to about specific questions regarding disbursements. So that would be Kevin. Talk to Kevin about specific questions. Where can you find more information on SSDI rules for trust able, et cetera? So the Social Security Administration, so ssa.gov, or if you put Social Security Administration procedures, operations, manual systems, the POMS, and that's what we follow. It's SSA POMS, POMS. If you really want to get into it, guys, this only lets me text to hosts and panelists, so I can't text out. So it's SSA, P as in Paul, O, M as in Mary, S as in Sam. That's where you find out information about about those questions that you're asking. It's a very, 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 very extensive document. Teresa wants to know, thank you. One more question. Would you explain the difference between SSI and SSDI, and are either based on the family total household income? If so, does a reduced total family household income change the monthly amount for the beneficiary? So Teresa, that's really a Social Security question, and we have Social Security basics coming up maybe next month, I think it is. And we also have a 1.5-hour webinar on our website, but very simply stated, supplemental security income is for a definitive group of people with disabilities, elderly, families with small children, women who are pregnant, all with an income and resource asset limit of under $2,000. If married, it's under $3,000. The individual with disabilities is 18 years and 1 month or older in order to be eligible for SSI. Social Security disability is a benefit, an entitlement that either the parents and or the individual have paid into. If the individual with disabilities was diagnosed prior to the age of 22, they can potentially piggyback on the parents' Social Security. When the parents are either retired and drawing Social Security, disabled and drawing Social Security, or deceased, It starts when the first one of those parents starts drawing their Social Security in whichever form I just mentioned. When the second one starts drawing it, the higher of the two is applied. And the person that was on SSI, for example, my daughters get SSI. When I retire and start drawing my Social Security, I'll tell Social Security and I'll move them over to Social Security Disability, which is then equivalent to 50% of what I receive. So I'd still get my, say, $2,000 and they would each get $1,000. There is a family limit. So Social Security does that adjustment, and that's all also on the ssa.gov website. So that's a real quick answer. Ginger wants to know, if you scan receipts and send those, do you still need to send the physical paper copies too?
No, if the scanned copies are legible though, I just want to make that note. If you take a picture of it, just a quick tip, use your phone and take it vertically down, not at an angle, because this angle is very difficult to read, but straight over the top, we're able to read it all. I know that's kind of technical, but
that's a good point.
On my end, it's a lot easier to read it when it's a good picture taken.
And if it's not a good picture, then I write back to Kevin after he sent it to me through DocuSign, and I say, I can't read this. What's it say?
Yeah.
And then he has to figure that out. You're welcome, anonymous attendee. Thank you. She says she says it's an amazing wealth of practical information. We'll check the website. And then Lynn wants to know, what if you have a combination of SSDI and SSI? If you mean in regards to disbursing, we always take the SSI rules into consideration.
Right.
And Robin Cassie said, what is EBT? I had to look it up. It's called electronic benefit transfer.
Okay.
So
and
that's
it's similar to like EFT, electronic transfer, or ETF, electronic transfer of funds.
Yeah, but the electronic benefit transfer, that's more like if you have receiving benefits from Social Security or somebody and they transfer it that way. We don't have EBT cards. They're credit cards or reloadable debit cards. So I'm getting ABLE questions, and we're at our limit. I'll take 2 minutes to describe ABLE. What does ABLE account for Social Security disability, and what can explain the ABLE account? Okay, so an ABLE account, Achieving a Better Life Experience, is another tool in the toolbox. It was meant to be a transactional account, money in, money out. It's a place where people with disabilities can save money. There are some restrictions that the trust programs don't have, such as you have to be disabled prior to 26. There's only a maximum of $7,000 aggregate contributions per year. You may only have one ABLE account. You have to designate who's managing it. If it hits $100,000, then your SSI will be suspended. There's a cap on it state by state. So none of that applies to the special needs trust. You can have as many trusts as you want. You can put as much money in it as you want. The difference is we don't commingle the money. The family funded money is specific to the family trust because you get to designate who inherits when a beneficiary dies. And on the self-funded trust, there's a Medicaid payback if the person had Medicaid, or you can leave it to the Arc of Northern Virginia. The ABLE account does have tax benefits in that the return on the investments are not taxed when the money is used correctly. And it's a great way to just maybe put in earnings that aren't being spent by the end. They're still counted, but earnings that aren't being spent by the individual. It can be used, like I said, in Virginia to pay for room and board without it being reportable to Social Security. Other states have different rules. The biggest difference, something to remember, is it never replaces the third-party trust, because the third-party trust, not only does it have the broadest use of the funds, but it's also meant for that retirement plan that you want to leave the individual with disabilities. You leave it to the third-party trust, life insurance policies from your own revocable trust, from a last will and testament, family contributions, etc. That's where all that money goes, and you determine who inherits. The ABLE account still has a federal Medicaid payback attached to it. Virginia and Maryland removed the state Medicaid payback, but not the federal. The feds have not removed the payback on the ABLE account. We see some people have a combination of the two. I don't have ABLE accounts for my daughters, primarily because any discretionary money I have, I put into my own retirement accounts and or investment accounts so that I can control that money outside of the trust and or outside of an ABLE account. So if I need a new roof, I can access that money. Once it's in the ABLE account, you can't put a new roof on your house using the money in the ABLE. You can't use all of the money for sure. Yeah, so we see a lot of people that think that they can replace, they see the tax benefits of the ABLE and think that it can replace the third party and first party trust, but it cannot in many instances. The first party trust is the only trust where adult child support may be irrevocably assigned. The Virginia birth injury funds may be irrevocably assigned. Alimony, a settlement agreements, and survivor benefit for military retirees. That all may only be irrevocably assigned to a first party trust. The ABLE does not have that. The ABLE is more like a savings account. Pretty simple as to what goes in it. And once the money's in it, if you put your money in it and I put my money in it and Kevin put his money in it and the beneficiary put their money in it, if down the road you need to move it to a trust because the manager no longer wishes to manage it and you don't want to hand that money over to anybody else, it would have to go to a first party trust because the money is considered the beneficiaries. So that was all. That was the ABLE in, okay, it took me 4 minutes. You're welcome to the thank yous. Kevin, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. I love the new slides as well. They look great. Kevin's your man to go to when you have questions. Now, he does get bombarded by emails. And so if you need to talk to him, be very specific in your questions and be patient with us as we're in the middle of the move. And I'm in the process of training 4, hopefully 5 new staff very soon. And I'm looking for a client coordinator. So if anybody's interested in a full-time position with the ARC of Northern Virginia, send me your resume. All right, Kevin, last words of wisdom.
No, I just want to thank everyone for joining. If you have questions, you can reach out to me. My email address is kevin.collins@thearcofnova.org. And yeah, just be patient. I will respond to all emails. I just want to thank you all for joining.
Thank you so much. And we can end the recording.